Hi guys, this is Mahin. So today we're going to talk about hernia. This is going to be a theoretical and clinical approach combined. So the way I like to understand any disease is to learn it under certain subheadings just to get it organized in our mind. So we're going to talk about it under definition, the types of hernia, the risk factors and etiology of hernia, what are the clinical features including symptoms, signs, and clinical examination, what are the complications of hernias, how do you diagnose and what are the investigations you need to do, and the treatment. At the end of the video, I'm going to give you a list of important questions that can be asked in the exam. So let's get started. Hernia can be defined as an abnormal protrusion of a part or a whole of the viscus through an opening in the walls of the cavity that contain it. The important point in this definition being it's an abnormal protrusion and also it's through the walls that contain it. So now let's come to the types. Broadly, we can classify hernia into congenital and acquired. So congenital hernias can be, for example, diaphragmatic hernias, Bok-Talic, Morgagni, etc. But there can also be inguinal hernias in infants that are called congenital. And please remember the treatment of choice for those is herniotomy, and we do not use meshes in infants. Secondly, acquired. So acquired is all the other common hernias that we usually see. The second classification we can do is based on location. So based on location, you can have inguinal, femoral, epigastric, umbilical, paraumbilical, lumbar, obturator, and less commonly you can get Spigelian hernias and also internal hernias, which means that the contents are protruding within the abdominal cavity. For example, through the foramen of Winslow or paravesical hernias. But usually when we talk about hernia in the exam, we're only going to focus on inguinal hernias. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. But you should also know that there are all these other types of hernias. So there are also certain special classifications such as Nyhus, Gilbert, and European Hernia Society. You can look these up because it's going to be too long if I tell you in this video. So now that we know what is a hernia, we need to know what is the cause of the hernia, because what we're going to talk about in clinical history and examination is going to be the etiology, the diagnosis, and what are the complications. So that's why when you're taking the history, you need to keep in mind all of these risk factors. So risk factors can be broadly classified into weakness of the abdominal wall and things that cause increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. So weakness, of course, with age, you're going to get weakness of the muscles, and that can cause hernia. This is more commonly for direct inguinal hernias because those are the ones that protrude directly through the muscles. Secondly, you have to ask about past surgical history. This includes appendectomy, only open appendectomy, not laparoscopic. And the reason this happens is because the ilioinguinal nerve can be damaged, which in turn causes weakness of the muscles that it supplies. Again, this is specifically only for direct hernias. Another surgical history that you need to keep in mind is any abdominal surgery because that can cause incisional hernias, not only inguinal. The second risk factor we know is increase in intra-abdominal pressure. For example, a respiratory cause like a chronic cough due to asthma, COPD, urinary cause like benign prostatic hyperplasia, or any other obstructive uropathy that can lead to straining during urination. The third one we're going to talk about is bowel disturbances. So you have to ask about constipation because that can cause a chronic straining while defecation. Then, of course, obesity also causes an increase in the pressure, and weightlifting, although this is not common, but you can ask an occupational history whether, a factory worker might be predisposed to hernias. Now let's talk about clinical features. So firstly, symptoms. The two main symptoms that a patient will come to you with is a mass in the groin region and secondly, a dragging pain in the groin. When they tell you about the mass, you have to ask them what are the aggravating and relieving factors. So the size of the mass is going to increase on standing, walking, and coughing, and on straining. And the size of the mass is usually going to decrease on lying down, and sometimes the patient will manually be reducing the mass. If this history of reducibility is absent, then you either have to question your diagnosis or you have to think of a complicated hernia. Now let's come to the signs. You have to describe a hernia like any other normal swelling, including the shape, the size, the extent, the borders, and the surface. But apart from that, there are three main things that you need to mention in a hernia. First is, and most important, is the reducibility. Second is the expansile cough impulse, which will be seen both on inspection and palpation. Please note that this might be absent in an irreducible hernia. And the third is to be able to get above the swelling, which means to approximate your fingers above the swelling. This will not be possible in a hernia, and this is how you differentiate between a hernia and a hydrocele. The third thing that we need to do is the special tests. So there are three special tests: the ring occlusion test, the Siemens test, and the finger invagination test. The third one you only need to know theoretically because it is very painful if you do it while examining the patient. So please look up this procedure in DAS or any other textbook. And these are mainly to differentiate between direct and indirect hernia. Although this doesn't really affect the management, but you still need to clinically differentiate. So sometimes they're going to ask you what is taxis. So taxis is done when the hernia is irreducible and you want to check if you can manually reduce it. So the procedure for taxis is you flex the hip, adduct the leg, and also internally rotate. All of this is done to relax the tensor fasciae lata and the abdominal muscles. Once you've done this, you need to place one hand at the root of the scrotum and the other at the fundus of the hernia and gently try to reduce the hernia. This is also not commonly done while you're clinically examining the patient, but if the examiners ask you, you need to know this. And lastly, you need to do all the other clinical examination. So that includes respiratory to check for a chronic cough. Also examine the external genitalia because sometimes you might find a phimosis, which could be a cause for the chronic increase in abdominal pressure. And also you need to do a perectal examination to examine the size of the prostate. Coming to the complications. So this in order is irreducibility, obstruction, and strangulation. By irreducibility, it's quite obvious. We mean the hernia can't be reduced, and this could be due to adhesions within the contents of the hernia. Second is obstruction. This happens when the contents block the lumen. And also incarceration is a term that was previously used, but now you can just say if there's a large bowel hernia and the feces is the one causing the obstruction, then we can use the term incarceration. And lastly, there's strangulation, which means that the blood supply of the sac is completely obstructed, first venous and then arterial. So the important thing is while you're taking history, you need to ask about symptoms of complications. So if there's obstruction, you're going to get the 4 cardinal symptoms, that is colicky pain, vomiting, abdominal distension, and also obstipation, which means constipation, plus absence of flatus. In case of a strangulated hernia, the patient is going to have fever, severe pain and tenderness, and redness when you examine the mass. So that's going to give you a hint about strangulation.